Perfection versus pursuit of excellence. As business leaders, perfection is kind of one of these things that we can often get trapped in, but pursuit of excellence is something that you can get everybody in your organization on board with. Today, business coach Linda Krei shares with us a lot around people and processes and how we can strive collectively for that pursuit of excellence. Linda, tell me, why business coaching for you?
That is a really great question, Michelle. And the way I would answer it is I feel that it's almost a calling at this season of my life. My passion is to really get the next generation of leaders next ready for whatever that is, because I do believe there's a need for that out there in our world. And so at this season of my life, that's where I'm at. I do believe that people often underestimate themselves and they just need somebody to build them up, lift them up, hold space for them, encourage them, validate them, you name it. And intrinsically, that fills my bucket. So that really is a part of why coaching for me is why not? It really is more about investing in others and then the gift that one receives when you do that.
And why is it important that business leaders do have somebody that can help build them up, that's in their corner, hold space for them?
Yeah, it's extremely important. And I would say, just from experiencing it myself, somebody poured into me. Somebody saw something in me that I didn't see that was worth developing. It's kind of that diamond in the rough, if you will. And I do believe that when you have someone that can objectively be in that space with you, somebody other than the person who signs your paycheck. I mean, there is an important relationship there. I do get that. Yet for one to really explore the possibilities and go to that deep, authentic level of discovering possibility and asking questions and not be threatened by at some level, you remove the fear from the beginning and you make it safe. And that investment is investing in oneself and playing it forward, because when you do experience it, then right, it's one of those things where you're more likely to want to play it forward. So it does build from generation to generation, and to me, that's about legacy living. That's what we should be doing, leaving the world in a better place, right?
So for business leaders listening, there probably is somebody that they have had throughout their career who has poured into them and invested them to help them and give them that leg up. But there's always that next level, isn't there? So from your experience in working with so many business leaders over the years that you've been a coach, what do you find is kind of the key to success?
First, I would start with just the definition and the mindset around what coaching is and what it's not. So we're not trying to fix someone. We're not trying to change someone. They need to discover from within where they want to go and where they want to grow. And I do believe that wisdom comes from within. So simply holding space for that discovery process is really important. And what's the next level? The next level of achievement. Where do they want to grow? Where do they want to explore? I like to use the analogy that often I meet people as subject matter experts of something, SMEs. So I just ask them to redefine that a bit and say, well, what if you would become a subject matter explorer, right? An explorer. Where would you like to go? So there's always new places and spaces to explore, and you discover what you may not be interested in. And then you'll discover where you might want to grow. And usually it's some natural talents that people like to hone and sharpen and build upon. And so that's a fun process as well. I do believe that's a lifelong journey and an investment to make along the way. And maybe more than one, right? More than one mentor, coach, accountability coach. There's lots of levels of support and growth and expected outcome.
I'm going to ask you a question. This might seem a bit random, but when you think about business leaders and their career path, and people have got a natural skill set based on whether it's a DISC profile, Gallup test, or whatever their strengths are. And often it requires you to draw on different parts that you're not an expert or not a strength at. When you think about career paths for business leaders, and that doesn't matter whether it's business ownership or leadership in an organization, should you find a role, a specific kind of, even in a business, your role in the organization chart, should it play to your strengths?
Well, it is interesting. I ran across, you're probably familiar with Marcus Buckingham, and he's a researcher, an author, and his latest book is called Love and Work. And in it, he talks about that which you love and make it your work. And so there is something to that, right? The whole idea of when you hear people say they get stuck, and maybe it's that because they don't like what they're doing, or they say, well, I love this part about my work, but then they go on to list all the others. And what he's basically saying is you only really need 20% of what you do, whether it's in a day or a week or a month. If 20% is what you love, then you have the resiliency and the energy to manage the others. And you manage them so they don't get in the way, or until you identify that you want to develop those skill sets even further so that they complement what you're doing. So to me, that's kind of how I see it. A person should know, or at least start discovering what their natural strengths and tendencies are, and then do a bit of testing that. Where is there a need for that? What are my transferable skills that could be used in other places? And that could take you down a whole different career path than you might be today. So there is something to that tapping into the natural pieces. And then those of us that are lifelong learners and stay curious, we want more of that. We want to keep learning and growing. And to me, that's the essence of what this is all about.
So that's really interesting, that statistic, 20%. As long as 20% of what you're doing in your day or your week is something that you love, then that should be enough to fill your bucket for the other stuff. I'm surprised it's only 20%.
It's only 20%, right? And it's consciously being aware of that and identifying it. And when you listen for it, we hear it. Oh, I love this about my job. I love this about my work. They don't just say, I like this. They really use that love word. And so isn't it interesting that that's one of the words in business that we don't spend a lot of time with? And yet those are the top performers. Those are the people that are the outliers from the average that he talks about too. Let's learn from them. What is it? It could be someone who is in the janitorial services, and they totally reframe how they care for and get the room ready for those that they're serving. And this is what they love about their job. They love making sure that like the Disney rooms, that the animals are there with the towel decorations, or they're incorporating the day into welcoming them back. They talk about loving those kinds of things. So it really works for all of us, leaders, business owners, anyone that works in an environment where they feel called to their work.
So as an executive coach, as a business coach, you know what cues to look for to find that the strengths and things that they love doing. How does someone do that? Can you do that on your own, or what are some tools to help them figure out what they love doing?
Yeah, a lot of folks look for data to inform them, right? And when it can be data that's about them because they're contributing to it, they're going to trust it too. So I really do like to use assessment tools. They sometimes do feel like tests, and so I usually say it feels like it. Yeah, everyone gets 100%. So let's start there. And yet the information that's created, the data to inform them and discover about themselves. And the more they do that as leaders, the more they work on themselves, the better they're going to be as a leader to inspire people, right? They'll get out of their own way when they're more confident about who they are and what they're about. So that's part of, in my mind, playing it forward, where, I meet people here that business is about people and process. And sometimes we make it more complicated than that, but it is about people and process. And I believe we've got good people want to do good things. And usually people agree with that, yes. Yet we act as if when something goes bump in the night, it's a people issue. And we start doing the blame thing versus looking at the underlying process that those great people need to be successful. And processes are often outdated or broken or fractured, or they don't even exist. And so when you have those people be a part of generating and creating those processes, they are going to own them because they get their fingerprints all over them. And to me, that is the level of engagement that we need to look at in business. So starting with those assessment tools to understand that about ourselves and then move forward with some basic assumptions, I believe is the way to get started and move forward.
So, kind of BFI that you just said is with people and processes. I would have not, we would normally think that they're two very different, one's soft skills when it comes to people and one's more hard skills, processes, systems, SOPs, workflows, etc. But are they? Are they actually connected?
They are. And here's where they connect really strongly. Communication, which everyone says they want more of, communication is a process.
How
It's a
is that
process of
process?
connecting one human to another. So when you think about, oh, we need to communicate, nobody ever tells me anything around here. It is a process of communication, and that starts with understanding our own natural styles and then the styles of others so that we can adapt, stay authentic to who we are, and yet adapt so that other people are heard and validated, and that communication process takes place. And that to me is what you leverage for everything else that's in front of us, because we really can only get things done through and with others. And so, they're not just mechanics or machines, they're human beings, even though we do act like we're human doings often. We need that element. And to me, communication and starting there is a great place to start. And that's usually where I start when I work with business leaders and business owners.
So you look at what the challenges are with their current communication.
What I ask is, how well do they think they're communicating in their organization? And then I'll ask them, well, how do you know? Where's the data to support that? Because that really is the evidence. And once we then use some tools and it's their data, then we start the communication process. And then we usually have others take the assessments as well. And then we do a team building workshop, and then they want more. That's usually what happens. And sometimes they use tools just to identify and to kind of label themselves. And to me, that's kind of sad, because people say, oh, yeah, I've done assessments before. Well, have you used them? Have you integrated them into your world, into the culture that you're shaping? Because every organization has a culture. The question then becomes, is it the one you want? Are you intentional about it? And that takes effective communication to bring people along.
And also mindset. So you mentioned that first, the discovery process, and that, the SME with the explorer versus the expert. You have to be open to, because what you're referring to, where you're asking others for feedback, say on communication as an example, you have to be open to the responses that you get, which can be confronting at some times, right?
It can be. And what I find is people often just accept a statement and they don't explore it further when there's more questions there. And so for me, a skill set around leadership is that leading with inquiry. Or someone makes a statement and we say, we missed the opportunity. Well, say more about that. Go a little deeper. Tell me more. And engage them instead of just a statement that's made and people accept it as if it's truth or fact. And oftentimes it's not. It's a story, and we can get lost in it. So to me, a leadership skill set along with the assessment tools would be to be open to learning, as you're saying, and to use the powerful inquiry process, staying curious and asking questions and staying in that conversation long enough to move forward together. So that, it's an exchange agreement, right? That we're in this conversation together to move forward.
And so that's where it's important not just to do the assessment, but also what does that next piece look like, or the ongoing coaching and support around that for you and your team, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So when you think about people and processes, and many CEOs or business leaders, are wearing so many hats, and you mentioned 20%, if that's, all the part of their role that they love, then that should be enough. What is a way that business leaders can carve out time to also work on themselves and not just the business when you are wearing so many hats?
Yeah, absolutely. It is a protection of time for anything that's important, as important as any other meeting that they protect time for. And oftentimes they don't have it scheduled into their calendars. And so that is part of what I would ask them to do, is where is the working on me time? Where is the me management time? Because it's right there in that word, me management. It's in there. And so dedicating that It's in the Midwest from where I'm at here in the United States. Oftentimes there's this idea of I'm the last person to take care of. It's almost like self-care is selfish care, and it's not. It's one of the most important things that need to be done. So even working with that mindset around investment in self and protecting some time for that is an important place to understand, an important place to start. What's their mindset around that? So then protecting that time and including, right, I'm congruent. I spend time with my master coach as well, making sure that I hold that meeting and protect time. That's as important as any other business deal that we're about to do. And so when I hear people say, well, yeah, that's that soft stuff. And I'm going to say the soft stuff is the hard stuff. Because usually that's the piece that they need to work on. So even change the language around those effective relational skill sets. If there's a block there with the language that they're using because they're discounting it, that changing and shifting that mindset is part of it. And once we do, it unleashes potential and possibility that they hadn't even seen. So they really can achieve more by doing less, because they've now invested in a way to inspire and motivate others. So to me, that's an important step of how do you go about it, protecting some time for that discovery as well.
Achieving more by doing less. I mean, gosh, that sounds pretty appealing. I'm sure it will for many listeners too. So, we get that, we understand that, working on ourselves, having a coach and time for, me time for the learning and development is really important for the success for ourselves and for the business. But, as you learn and grow as a leader, you've also got to take a team along for the ride with you. And sometimes there's frustrations in, that kind of learning pace of the team as well, which is why I love so much of what you do with teams. What's some tips for leaders that how they can take the team along for the ride?
Absolutely. One thing I would say is listen to the language that they're using. So if they use language like, to get anything done, I need to do it myself, or here, let me just show you so we can get it done. The whole idea is that there is going to be a learning curve and a practice field. Can you think of any high performing team that just shows up on the court or the field or on stage and can be a high performing team without practicing? It's required. And so sometimes I think that expectation of instant perfectionism or doing it the way I do it, it's just not there. That's a goal toward consistency that has to be developed by investing in the practice field with the team. And then to me, it's a simple model. When we do something together, the first question should be, well, what worked well? And give your team an opportunity to answer that about themselves. Well, here's what worked well. All right, great. Then to be even more effective, what should we know? What can we learn? And to me, we often look at only the things that didn't work well, and we miss the opportunity of inspiration, validation, and engagement by not first visiting what worked well. So to me, that's a key for bringing a team along, is to encourage them to validate, to already show them that that they are effective. You just want to get them to that next level of growth. So to be even more effective is good language that I use to coach.
Have you got a client example where this has worked really well and how they've overcome this?
It is interesting. It's not an academic exercise. So I'll just use an example of a college that I've been working with for the past 4 years, I guess now, and starting with the leadership cabinet. And again, all of them are PhD level, right? So very IQs that are off the charts, very intelligent people. And when we get to this place about working with others, it is a matter of thinking differently. And it's about, yes, bringing your thought process. It's also aligning your heart, right? So when you align your head and your heart, your hands and feet will know what to do. So the example with them is they felt a responsibility of having decisions pretty much at the 95% level ready to launch and implement. And what I helped them see is that was working more towards perfectionism rather than pursuing excellence. And if they did all of that work, what did they need the rest of the team for? What did they need the rest of the department heads and the deans and the faculty and such? And so we really stepped back and did a lot of work with that. And we talked more about the key behaviors that we value, including process of decision making, and recognizing that were they letting great get in the way of good? And when that happened, they were robbing others the opportunity to get involved and learn and grow and contribute. So that would be a great example of some work that we did that we're now cascading out into all the levels of the organization in a way that is shifting the culture in the way that they want it, in the way that they intended. Engagement is going up, right? And we're measuring these things. Behaviors, alignment of behaviors and values, what's expected. Key behavior indicators are now defined and included in job descriptions and in the hiring practice and in the performance management part of it as well. So that would be an example. Again, it's not an academic exercise, and yet that emotional intelligence and awareness has to be partnered with the IQ of people as well. And that's how we're going to connect.
Perfection versus pursuit of excellence. I mean, that's a really kind of thought-provoking sort of comparison, isn't it?
It is, because it frees one up to authentically be in a place where they can take risks, they can test and measure, they can experiment. And that's exactly what young children do when they're learning and growing. They are not inhibited by that fear of messing up or not being perfect. And so, we talk about the only failure is if one chooses to not participate. Everything else we should learn from. And that's why I love that idea of, all right, well, what worked well? And now, to be even more effective, what should we consider? And that's the process that we were using with this client that I was referencing. And embracing that it frees one up to pursue excellence, which is the journey instead of a destination.
Gosh, I feel like we could just end the episode right there. That was just brilliant.
It's great. It's fun work, isn't it, to spend time in this space?
Yeah. And Linda, leadership can be a bit of a buzzword today. So when you think about leadership, is that management versus leadership? Is management more the processes and leadership is the people?
Well, I do try to define that a bit to help people sort through it a bit. You manage processes and you lead and inspire people. And, that at some level, it helps. I also say leadership is not just in a title or a role. It's more about being an influencer. And you can be an influencer in all places and spaces in life, in all levels within the organization. And oftentimes people with the greatest credibility are those leaders among equals because they're such influencers. And being mindful of that, to me, that is a natural talent. Some people just naturally have it. They're not even aware of it. So identifying that, I think, is helpful. And that, yes, it is a different skill set. Oftentimes we promote people that are really good at their technical skills, and then we expect them to be people leaders. And it's a totally different skill set. They complement each other, and you need both. It's just that you can't just assume that one is intuitive of the other, because it's not. One's more process driven versus the other is more inspirational.
So that's where, if you do lean more comfortably into one or the other, it is important to look at the growth areas where you do need some more support or learning, and bring that in with, say, a coach.
Absolutely. And to be aware that it takes both to create the environment for others to excel. And that's what leadership is, to create the environment so others can reach their potential and give and participate. And when there's something that stifles that, or a barrier or something that's preventing that, what are the obstacles? What's getting in the way? And often it is that very thing. Are we creating the environment that these individuals need so they can be at their best? And I get that we're not going to be at our best always, but more times than not, we will. And when you're creating the environment for people to step up and support each other, everyone wins. So when leaders get better at doing that, everyone wins. There's no doubt about that.
So when you think about people and processes, does one come before the other? So you see a lot of businesses, and this is often where they get most stuck, is they've hired people before the processes have been written to support the people and the team. Does one come before the other, or is it kind of on the
Well,
same?
I just meet people where they are, Michelle, because I don't want to imply that one's right or wrong. And a lot of people think that way, right? I would say meet people where they are. So when I started out as a solopreneur, if you will, I didn't have a lot of processes in place because I didn't need them. It was just me as a solopreneur. Then when I decided I was going to build a practice and a firm and build a team, we were both building team and putting processes in place. And what I realized is the very people that need to own as process owners are the very people that I wanted to help build them. So, I think it can be a parallel track. And sure, there's going to be some steps that are prerequisites of others along the way, but it's more of a stepping stone process that way. So you can bring the people in the process of building at the same time. What do they say? You're both flying the plane and building it as you're flying it. There is a stepping stone process, and yet engage the very team that you have. And if you don't have the right people on your team, then let's identify that, because we're doing a disservice to people if we keep them and they're not in the right spots on the bus, or maybe not even on the right bus, if you will. And that there's a crucial conversation that needs to take place. And sometimes people just don't know how to start those conversations. And you can do it very respectfully. And usually people thank you in the end when you have courageous conversations like that as well.
I was going to ask you that, do you find that, working with business leaders that they do often not take that step because they are uncomfortable to have some of those conversations? And what's a tip that you can share that kind of help you open up the floor, or the framework to have those healthy conversations? It's a win-win.
Yes, often it's that they don't know how to start them because they can be messy and they can be hard. And so sometimes I just have them recognize that and even start the conversation. This is a tough conversation. We need to have it. It might be messy. It might be kind of hard, though. Here's the expectation or what we desire. And here's what we're actually observing. And is there a gap? And then we talk about, what do you see? And what do I see as the gap? And then what would be the impact and the consequence if that gap continued? Or what can we do, and how do we move forward to close that gap? So when you exceed expectations, you celebrate. When you fall short, you mitigate. You say, all right, what do we need to do to move us forward? And then you ask for commitment. And when people say, well, yeah, I'll try, I would say to you, what do you do with I'll try? It's either a yes or no, and either is acceptable. So if it's no, I might not be prepared at this moment to have the conversation with you, though the right conversation to have is to find a place for you in the right environment so you can be full and whole and fit on the team. And if the answer is yes, then great, commit to that and we'll move forward. It's this I'll try space that I think we let people live in sometimes, and then we don't know what to do with it because we say, are you getting the results? Well, no, but I'm trying, and that's what you accepted. So there is a tool and a process. It's almost an outline for a conversation that you can use in leadership and parenting and in any kind of relationships where you want to move forward with that relationship. So we don't fracture relationships, we build upon them, and we can do that through the tool of conversation. And that's often what doesn't happen. They have a conversation, but not with the right people, oftentimes.
Yeah, it's interesting that you just mentioned parenting at the same time as leadership, because it's just, as a parent, you just just do what I say. But often that doesn't have the result that you want, as it correlates with team too, right?
Absolutely. It is that the transactional analysis model where there are times when the parent has to be the person that sets the boundaries and sets the rules. And there certainly is a place for that. And then there comes this time where you've got to have that exchange to say, what's in it for you? I think about a simple example of my son growing up, and I'd ask him, Carter, did you make your bed and clean up and pick up your room? And he'd say, yeah, Mom, I know. And I became this nagging mom of always asking that, knowing that necessarily isn't what's going to happen, until I asked him, pretty much what it is that he wanted. Well, he wanted his Legos out and ready to go for when his buddies came over so they could finish building what they had started. And, for him, is, hey, Mom, my bed's ready for me to jump into. Why would I make it? It's ready for me then the next time. Well, that's what a 10-year-old would say. Well, what did I want? I wanted my house in order. So here's what he said. This truly happened in his brilliance of being 10. Well, why don't I just shut my door? So if we wouldn't have had that conversation, right? I would have grown up knowing me as the nagging mother that was always asking, did you make your bed and pick up your room? So I think that's the lesson in business and in life as well, is what conversation do we need to have so that we can understand what's in it for both of us to find the win forward and move forward together.
Yes, some great parenting tips there. I didn't even have the conversation. I just used to shut the door of my son's room, but I definitely relate.
Beautiful.
So when it comes to, often, businesses do get stuck at this point where you do have team and you're trying to implement some processes and change to kind of take the business to the next level. How do you determine then, the people that need to stay on the bus and the ones that don't?
Well, you have to get clear in your own expectations of what you need. So to me, it's a matter of taking the people out of the equation and start thinking about what does the business or what does the organization need from a current org chart and then for a future org chart. So once again, what do you desire? What do you need? What do you actually have? And if there's a gap, then you start looking at, well, what are the skill sets? What are the behaviors? What is it that you're looking for? And then you look and see if you have that on your team and you move those people into that growth opportunity, or you recruit them from the market, or you recruit and develop them and grow them with a career pathway. And I think those organizations, especially the high reliability organizations that intentionally move people around to discover those types of things, become better positioned because then they don't become person dependent on a process or a place. And when you get person dependent, you want to depend on people, but if it's person dependent and they're the only ones that know how to do something or do it only in a certain way, you can almost be held hostage to that. And that is stifling growth. So I worked in the utility industry, which is high reliability organization 24/7, right? You should expect that when you flip the switch, your lights come on. And I also worked in healthcare, which is a high reliability 24/7 organization as well, industry. And, both of those, when you think about it, the better that we got at moving people around so that they could grow and develop and take them out of their comfort zone, the stronger we became. They started using more of their own critical thinking skills and innovation. And so they became really learning organizations just by that intentional strategy.
So we haven't really talked a lot about culture yet. I want to dive into that for a minute. So culture, is it something that is just a way of being for an organization? Is it a behavior? Talk to me about your definition of having a great culture.
Culture to me is the way we do things around here. Sometimes there are policies that are written and guided. And so I often listen for that. Cultures that are intentional have less policies and procedures because people just naturally will know what to do to move forward. And those organizations that feel like something goes bump in the night and now they need another policy to be able to prevent it, I listen for those because there's usually an opportunity to do some good work there. So again, every organization will have a culture. It's just, is it the one that they want? So when you spend some time talking about what would success look like? What would it look like? And they want people to be innovative. They want people to use their critical thinking skills. Well, part of that is then looking at what kind of a decision-making process do they use? What kind of leadership styles do they use? Servant leadership is a style. And so is more of a dominating authoritarian is a style. And those can be both effective in some industries and not effective in others. So knowing, especially in the service industry, usually it's that more servant leadership style. So even starting with that And then looking at not just your mission, vision, and core values, looking at those key behavior indicators, those key behaviors that are expected to live the core values, and integrating those and shaping and forming and communicating those would be an important place to start.
And how often should leaders bring their team together to work on culture pieces for the organization?
Well, there's lots of different ways to do it, I believe, and frequency is a function of what is their ability to bring people together and still run the place. And so creatively, as I've talked about the 24 organizations, that can be done as well, as long as we protect time and do some planning. And the more you do even cross training, the easier it is to bring people offline to continue to do that kind of work. Lean methodology is another tool that we like to use from a process improvement perspective, because that does allow for people to come offline, if you will, outside of their normal duties and responsibilities, yet somebody's got to step up and backfill those so that we can spend some time shaping and working on culture. So some people do it, quarterly, some people do it monthly, some people have dedicated teams that are representative of the different departments throughout the organization as almost ambassadors, if you will. So there are several models and ways to do it. The idea, though, is to make a commitment and make sure that it's supported at all levels in the organization, including the board, if there's a board of directors.
It's interesting because you often, as a CEO, think of culture as not necessarily a metric that you can measure. It's a soft kind of, something that you want to have in an organization because that contributes to retention and success of the business, but often isn't attributed to a profit metric.
Yes, and here's what I would say to you. There are indicators out there to think about, though, and to measure. So, for example, when you have a healthy, high-performing culture and people are less actively undermining, in other words, they are working toward good, we unleash that potential in ways that reduce the number of work injuries because they're more engaged, they're paying more attention, they're more fully present. So we have literally watched work injuries reduce. We've watched work comp premiums reduce, right? Because there's less risk there. We've got people with greater confidence, so they're willing to take more informed risks to test and measure and try new things. So they stay more relevant out in the marketplace instead of, because if you're not learning and growing, you become more stagnant and you will become irrelevant. And that's why some organizations have to, close the doors. So to me, that's all a part of culture shaping, is who do you want to become and who are you becoming? And what's the environment you're creating intentionally for that?
Love that. Linda, to wrap up, can you share, for business leaders, what's your favorite book and why?
Well, I guess a recent one I've already mentioned this. I really love the work that Marcus Buckingham is doing because it's research based. And then he's also a great presenter. There are some authors out there that do a lot of great research and they really can't present it in a way that engages others. So I really do follow him and look at all of his research. He's worked with the Gallup organization quite a bit. And so there's several books that he's written around Discover Your Strengths, Break All the Rules. The idea of rules should be there to guide us. And we're often the ones that create those rules. So we're also the ones that should keep them current and relevant and get rid of them if they no longer serve us well. So those would be a few. And then, I think there's another one called Awakening Corporate Soul, that sometimes it's just reigniting the spirit of the organization. We get so busy doing the technical side that we forget the foundation of why did we go into business anyway, and what is our mission, and how does it help us stay grounded? Because leaders, with all due respect, will come and go. And yet when we're solid in the foundational elements of our mission, vision, core values, and those behaviors, leaders should embrace those and help move those forward, not come in and change them. Unless they're toxic, then they need some attention for sure.
And who's been a really influential coach or leader for you, mentor for you throughout your career?
Interesting. Yes, I would say her name is Mickey McMillan. She actually is a certified master coach with the International Coaching Federation. She's the one who really ignited my interest and spirit in becoming an executive coach, and then expanding it in other areas with mid-sized and small businesses as well. And it was really about holding space with the theory that the answers come from within when you do that, right? The wisdom comes from within when you hold space. And then when you intentionally surround yourself with the people that you want to become more like, right? So that might mean you have to let go of some relationships of folks that aren't holding you back or not advancing you to become all that you're created to be. And so even just spending time there with her was very, very helpful. And then since then, my goodness, I can list a lot of different individuals for different things, depending on what I want to work on. In business, when you're a firm owner or own your own business, you've got to have a massive marketing machine. So what does that look like? Maybe it is developing your leadership executive team. Well, what does that look like? Maybe it is systems. So there's lots of different accountability coaches, if you will. There are industry coaches that I believe have a place as well. And then that will bring you to a certain place. And if you want to excel and become that top box, right, the best of the best, then invest in a coach to take you to that place and find your competitive edge there. So I've added more to what you've asked me, I know. And yet it usually is a person or a life event that will take us there to do that reflective work. And then I would say I've also learned from leaders what not to do. So there are lessons there, right? Instead of getting stuck with, oh, well, I can tell you about a time when, it's like, well, what did I learn from that particular leader? I learned what not to do. And that there's a lesson in that as well. And so just reframe one's thinking to not become a victim of something, but rather use it to grow from it.
And best piece of advice that you've ever received?
Oh my goodness. One of the pieces of advice for me was, because of my style, I like to be involved in a lot of things. Think about the critical few versus the massive many. So what are the critical few along the way to focus on and complete and achieve, and then move on to the next? So it kind of lays out that path forward and the stepping stone, and you don't get so overwhelmed. So that would be one. The other one is don't play small. Everyone has gifts to give and to contribute, and to not rob others the opportunity to learn from those gifts by playing small.
Linda Krei, thank you so much for the time and the wisdom today.
It has been a joy and a pleasure, Michelle, to spend some time with you. And we could probably go on and on and on. And yet I know that there needs to be a sunset to our time together. I would welcome the opportunity, though, to continue having a conversation with anyone that'd like to spend some time in that space.
Michelle Adams, your host here. Hats off to you for committing to your learning by listening to this podcast. And if you'd like some help implementing some of these strategies, then click the link in the description to find your local action coach. They can help you put these strategies into action and take your business and your life to the next level. In the meantime, like and subscribe so that you're the first to get our next episode. We'll see you soon.